The highlights of things on either ends are what makes it fantastic. Not that you can see like these spirals everywhere, but you can see like rhythms, and anywhere that there's a rhythm, you can actually understand it as a spiral. I was following behind a car, and they had like this brush splashing up, and the brush was only visible because when water is moving quickly, it has white water. What this car had when it was moving quickly on the ground was white water splashing up behind its tires. And on either tire in the middle of them was a pattern of a rhythm because it was spiraling behind the car. You know in the cartoons where they run really quickly and behind them is like this drift of wind? Well, this was in the water behind the car, and it was between both of the tires kicking up equal amounts from either tire, spewing up. And it was following it in the same pattern that you see the wind blush by the person who's running quickly. And inference patterns on the right, inference patterns on the left, the crest in the middle. Quantum experiment aside, the experience of life is like you gotta know what you're doing and why you're alive. One main way the enemy wins is by confusing you and having you sell your soul. This can happen when you think that you don't have what it takes in order to be alive in the first place, and then you would start changing in order to fit something that isn't even truthful. The true meaning is that you've got your body, and then your body isn't meant to embody a entity, corporation. In the lockdown, all the people owning corporations got even richer because they got all this money from saying people are non-essential. The non-essential people had lights turned out, they had their jobs thrown out to waste, and lo and behold, in recycling and trying to return to normal, difficulties would surmount. If you were to put it on a screen, the barcodes of that would be like separate further, and you would see on the right category and the left category as two over accentuations, a cut and clear dry of either essential or non-essential. Anything in between, which would be identities of people showing characteristics of why they're unique, be recycled as negligible. The less that you have an identity, the more that your body is internally going to be reaching for something in order to make sense. And if the only thing it's grabbing onto is like a different combination that is different than your inert sensibility, your inherent desire of your natural instincts, that'll be like cut and set aside, cut and set aside, ongoing in a recycle until it is something so foreign that you can only grasp onto a barcode or a branding or an enterprise, that of which you did not create because you had been set aside multiple times, distancing until you're 6 feet underneath the gravel or soil. Everyone's going to be soiled in 100 years, but in that 100 years, the fruits of labor would probably go up into an enterprise if you bent over and showed your belly. So the whole experiment is done in an environment, and an experiment in an environment in your body is localized by DNA. And the spirals of it is actually uncannily identical to an uncertainty principles wave function, mainly because they're both derived by waves. The DNA has a wave from its curvature, and the more that it is enacted through your own inherent ability to circum differences, it'll remain prominent. And for the double slit experiment, if you were to put not an observer but like an observer with 3D glasses on, Well, now you're looking at the display screen with what you think would be a 3D model, but it's just getting further from the actual screen's flat barcode. So you could have those barcodes on the flat display screen show the actual where it's left and the right, but with 3D glasses on, you would see the left and the right be polarized as a 3D model, mainly it coming from the center of the left and the right barcodes. Resolution wise, better. However, it is obscuring the actual derivation of the double slits experiment. And behind me at first glance is not a castle, but a church. You can tell so by its steeple. In sugar houses, the steeple is a capula, and it allows for the evaporation of the maple sugaring to turn into a syrup from the maple sap. That's what happens, and then it elapses. In the double slit experiment, the heart of quantum mechanics, where entanglement is still up in the air and misunderstood, and probably forever because the uncertainty principle. Nonetheless, the observer watching it is what makes the lapsing of one from the other. If it was maple sugar, it would be the maple sugar byproduct from the sap from tapping the trees. The observer in the double slit experiment does so just with being cognitive and looking at it. It sees on the screen inference pattern of bars from a single shot through two slits. A single shot through two slits would be what have baffled science from the start and maybe until the finish. Nonetheless, anything that is done in a single shot is recycled, and then that is the double slit experiment on steroids if it's in a continuum and then it hits a base plate. Excavating and elapsing, these are the same, but in a material sense it could be completely different. Most of us are alive is so we can understand a manifestation other than just a idea. The idea that the worst entity in the world was like having an opportunity to be the creator, that didn't happen, and so we're here as like proof of living existence. The offset is better than the onslaught. Behind me are silos, and if it were a castle, these could be like seen as a gala. The worst feeling is to think that like you're doing the right thing, and then at the last minute where you have like a check and you find out, wow, this got charged in the wrong way the whole time, would be like one way of achieving in binary an incredible amount of fuel for like getting like a whole bunch of payload. That would be the maximum way, is tricking the opposite end and at the last minute having them have to make up for the lost work that they thought they had achieved from the beginning. So picking your fights is a property in computer science known as object-oriented programming. With great coding is good growing. Actually, they're the opposite, because a plant and an electric wire are similar but not the same. I'm not a cyber expert, but I know how important things are to click on the right window when you're browsing. The computer is doing an AlterKit set, and what you're trying to accomplish in a task can be entirely different, but you've got to meet it in the middle. Psychological operation. When it's politicized, it can be as transparent as a ghost that's invisible. How many ghosts are invisible that are around you, you'll never know. And that's one thing that I think we can all understand what a good and bad energy vibe is. And I'm not a ghost hunter, but I do know the importance of great coding.